This is the Under the Ring Report, a weekly pro wrestling podcast. Now, here are the masters of armchair booking, John the Flesh Wound and Cousin Tom.
All right, wrestling fans, welcome back to the Under the Ring Report. I'm John the Flesh Wound, and with me,
Cousin Tom.
All right, guys, we've been kind of chatting about this on Twitter for the last week. You and I have been talking about it on and off on Facebook Messenger and everything else. But this week's show, we decided that we would like to chat about one of the greatest TV shows as we were children, but WWF Saturday Night Main Event. It was hard to describe for a person that doesn't understand kind of the dynamics of things, but when you were young, by both of us, we didn't have cable, right?
Right. No cable.
And you didn't get a chance to see Hulk Hogan because they had syndicated shows that you could see on Sunday mornings, Saturday mornings, but you never got to see Hogan and some of the big stars. You know, you'd see the second-class stars, but hardly ever a guy like Hogan they'd throw on free TV.
You only saw him if you paid to go to a house show.
Yeah. Well, and you could also, once in a while, USA still had their show, and he would show up on there, but they wouldn't put that on the syndicated stuff because they wanted you to buy cable.
Right.
Until Vince McMahon and Dick Ebersol got together in 1985 and brought us Saturday Night Main Event on NBC. The main reason for this, though, was because Dick Ebersol got really excited by watching how MTV benefited from being involved in wrestling. And after he saw that, he got a hold of Vince and said, all right, we need to set up a deal. And he gave them times on Saturday nights at 10:30 when they would normally run reruns of Saturday Night Live. We got 4 to 5 times a year, big time wrestling shows. And it wasn't somebody versus a jobber. It was kind of like having Nitro or Raw on a Saturday night, right?
Oh, it's absolutely. You got to see the superstars that you always wanted to see but never got to see.
So we want to talk about this for people who are so used to every week seeing big main events and stuff. That wasn't the way it was 25, 30 years ago. You know, most of the time we got to see Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig taking on a guy like Barry Horowitz, you know, or some other Iron Mike Sharp. You never got to see main event wrestling if you didn't have cable. So with that said, we're going to talk about, for us, some of our favorite matches from Saturday Night Main Event, and also talk to a few people. We've got Scary Terry, who's going to talk to us real quick about his favorite memory, and some of you actually posted your favorite memories on Twitter. I'm going to let Cousin Tom start first with his favorite memory.
All right. My favorite memory from Saturday Night Main Event isn't probably one that people would expect. You know, there's certain ones that people know instantly when you just mention a certain name. Mm-hmm. I am a lover of horrible B movies. Anything that is cheesy or bad, I love to watch them. Okay. I was notorious for staying up to watch Rhonda Shear's Up All Night. I was made fun of constantly over that, but I love those stupid movies. Mystery Science Theater 3000, I'm guilty. I like watching that show. Anyways, the movie that was an Oscar winner by far, No Holds Barred, Zeus Hogan, you know, that the human wrecking machine, as Zeus was called. That movie is awful, but I loved it. And I still remember it was a match with Brutus the Barber Beefcake versus Randy Savage. And he had Scary Sherry, where I guess she was Sensational Scary, in his corner.
Yep.
So they're having their match, and at one point in the match, you see him send Scary Sherry off, and she runs to the back. And the next thing you know, out comes Zeus. And, of course, he no-sells everything. Yep. Everything. And they start attacking, double-teaming Beefcake. And who comes to the rescue but the real American Hulk Hogan? And he comes out, and I remember he gets a chair, and he cracks Zeus in the back with a chair. And he doesn't flinch. He doesn't move. All he does is spit and flex his muscles. And they just zoom in on his cross eyes.
So he's Braun Strowman back then.
Oh yeah. and yeah, he no-sold. And then Hogan did his famous the look of fear, where he's yep. His eyeballs are bulging and he's shaking his head like he can't believe this guy didn't go down. That set up that whole movie run when it was coming out in theaters. And I think what makes it memorable for me is just how bad it is now when you watch it. But back then, as someone who was fully invested in the Hogan character, I remember like, oh my gosh, that guy got hit by a chair and he didn't even move. And now I want to see this movie. And, so I was hooked. I was a sucker.
Well, and you know what, too? The other cool thing, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have anyone out there smartening us up, or anything like that. So we had no idea that this guy was actually an actor or what was going on. And that was what the cool part. There was kind of that hard to tell between reality and fiction. So that was kind of weird.
Well, yeah, and that was 1989. So I would have been 14, somewhere around there, I think it was. And so I'm a teenager, but I didn't care. I was enjoying wrestling.
Well, see, and that's all matters. So I take a look, and it's funny. My memory kind of gets things mixed up a little. And as I first said, it was on Saturday Night Main Event on Twitter. After I go back to kind of check and see what I'm going to talk about, it was actually on a Friday night, because sometimes they would do, instead of Saturday Night Main Event, you'd get Main Event on Friday. And so I lump them all together because it was pretty much the same show. It's just sometimes they had to run it on Friday, depending what was going on. So what I always remember, 1988, Market Square Arena, Indianapolis, Indiana. And it was Hulk Hogan taking on Andre the Giant with the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase in his corner. This was after their WrestleMania 3 bout, okay? So this is February of 1988. Great match. Everything's going well. And damn it, double Hebners. Turned out there were twin Hebners, and that damn Hebner, he cheated Hulk Hogan out of the title and gave the belt to Andre the Giant. Now, the funny thing that I remember is that I was in high school, and being the geek I was, it was a band sleepover at school. And we had to beg and plead with the band director to let us watch Friday Night Main Event. There was a bunch of guys that were like, come on, man, we're going to be here. And I remember about 10 guys, and actually a lot of the girls and the teachers were watching too. And everybody was pissed. They were yelling and screaming because Hulk Hogan just didn't lose. Hulk Hogan was the immortal Hulk Hogan. And at that time, that was what everybody was pissed about. But if you think about it, that's really the only time we've had an angle like that where we had twin referees and they pulled something like that. We've had dirty referees and things like that, but what an amazing angle if you think about it, with the ability to have two referees that are twins and to screw over someone and get that much heat on the other person.
That was twin magic before the Bellas were even born, or while they were probably little kids.
Well, and the other cool thing about that match, that's what set up WrestleMania 4 and the tournament for the World Heavyweight title, because right after Andre wins that belt, he gives it to the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. And that's where
and that right there got more heat, I think, than the twins screwing Hogan out of the belt, because everybody hated the $1 Million Man.
Well, and
hated him
because everybody has a price.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's one of my favorite memories from the main events. You got another one?
Well, one guy that I didn't like as a kid, just because he was a heel and I wasn't supposed to like him, but Honky Tonk Man. And if you go back and watch some of those, he has a lot of matches with Macho Man. And they're pretty good. They stand up pretty well. But he has one where it's Honky Tonk and Macho Man, and he comes out, and Honky Tonk is back then they would call it infatuated with Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Every chance he got, he was giving her a little shake, rattle, and roll. He had Jimmy Hart in his corner, and he had, do you remember Peggy Sue?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, he had Peggy Sue out there. He's got multiple distractions going on. At one point Jimmy Hart rolls in the ring, drops the megaphone, Honky Tonk picks it up, hits Macho with it, and before you know it, now there's no one ringside for Miss Elizabeth, and Peggy Sue's on one side, and the crowd was red hot. They were all for Macho and Elizabeth, and I just really enjoyed it. It wasn't one of those really memorable matches that everyone talks about, But it was just one of those matches as a kid that I just always remember.
Yep. Now, I have another one, and, well, it seems like it's kind of a reoccurring theme, but it was also another Friday night main event match. And when I say this, you're going to go, oh, hell yeah. 1989, February 3rd, Bradley Center, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The Mega Powers are destroyed. That's right. Hulk Hogan, Randy Macho Man Savage, they took on the Twin Towers, Hakeem and the Big Boss Man with their manager Slick. And that's where we had been seeing this, Macho Man was the champion after winning the tournament at WrestleMania 4, and Hogan had helped him win, and they'd kind of formed this bond, it was kind of working as this great power together as tag team and helping out. But it seemed that Macho Man had kind of gotten in his mind that Hogan was after Elizabeth. That was pretty much it, and that he wanted Macho Man's title. That was it. And just all hell breaks loose, and it sets up the main event for WrestleMania 5. So you can see there was a theme. Every year around February, there was a big match there that kind of set up what was going to happen at WrestleMania. So that there is one of my top 5 easily, is Macho Man and Hulk Hogan breaking up on Friday night main event.
I still remember the backstage fight. Remember that?
Yes, I do. Well, because Elizabeth supposedly was hurt, and she was out, she was being looked at, and that's when all hell broke loose backstage.
Well, and as a kid, I still remember telling my sister or somebody, why does he keep picking up Macho Man's girlfriend? It's like, you don't mess with your buddy's girlfriend, so what's he keep picking her up for? But I still remember the backstage brawl where, she's screaming and he's knocking Hogan over the medical cots they had back there.
Yep.
Yeah, that was also a fantastic one.
Before we get into some more, I do want to rattle off a few that folks on Twitter kind of mentioned to us. And if you want to step in and talk about them real quick, feel free. This kind of ages people, okay? PPW Podcast at Twitter said it's got to be the first one on Fox. Your thoughts?
Well, the first one on Fox, it might be because I was there for the original run. The first one, I was like, I'm glad they brought it back, but, there was too much nostalgia there for me. And so that one didn't do anything for me, but still was a nice idea to bring it back.
Oh, yeah. Flabdullah the Butcher tweeted to us that his most memorable moment was the theme song for the Saturday night main event,
I heard someone else mention the theme song and I couldn't remember it. And then once I heard it, I'm like, oh yeah, now all of a sudden it just came back to me.
Another one, Everything Love Brings tweeted to us that Randy Savage taking on Jake Roberts. Remember the heat they had as Randy and Jake with his wife and stuff and all that crazy stuff that was going on?
Oh, they had an awesome rivalry and it lasted months.
Yeah, so he remembers that, and he believes that was also the same time that the Bulldog defeated the Hart Foundation and Hulk Hogan suplexing the Big Boss Man from the cage in Des Moines, Iowa. So
that right there, people always say Hogan only has 3 moves, which he does only have 3 moves, but that. I still remember that. That was an awesome. Big Boss Man was not little. Hogan was, he was full roid era then, so he was huge. And those two massive guys coming off my favorite cage, the blue steel cage, that was a spot and a half. That thing was fantastic.
The other one here, last one I've got, is from Sean ZK, and he mentioned Sid's heel turn on Hulk Hogan. And as you notice, there's a recurring theme. Hulk Hogan, during those early days, he was the man for Saturday night main event. And we talked earlier, man, that's the only way you got to see Hulk Hogan. But man, you would stay up and do everything you could just to see Hulk Hogan do something on Saturday night main event.
I remember begging, don't make me go to bed. Don't make me go to bed yet. It's Saturday night. Saturday main event's on. And I don't think people realize there were a lot of people that didn't have cable. It was just antenna, 3 channels if you're lucky.
Yep.
There was no Fox.
No.
You had ABC, CBS, NBC. You did not get a lot of wrestling.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you picked up something on a Saturday or a Sunday and, got to watch a little bit. So it was a huge deal for network television to carry WWF.
Well, we're kind of spoiled nowadays, and that's it, because we don't realize how special that was. People always thought the golden age of wrestling was when Nitro and Raw started putting on main events on TV, but that Saturday night main event was like a pay-per-view except they gave it away for free, and people flocked to it because that's the only way you could see it. It was either that or you're going to watch it on closed circuit TV when they had, the four big pay-per-views at that time. They didn't have a pay-per-view every month or what have you. So it was a big deal. It was kind of like another pay-per-view they gave away for free. And, before we get any farther, our resident scary one, Scary Terry, dropped in real quick and cut a quick line for us on the hotline, which if you don't know by now, you can call our hotline and leave a voicemail, and holy cow, you will actually get on the air with us. It's pretty crazy, but it's 715-600-3263. Anyway, here's Scary Terry's thoughts on Saturday Night Main Event.
Okay, so Saturday Night Main Event. I used to watch this on the regular when I was a kid, and I will never forget Jake the Snake Roberts terrorizing Andre the Giant with Damien. Because, they were teasing the snake the whole night. You knew it was going to happen, but when it finally happened, the payoff, Andre freaking out. You saw this massive monster that could not be slain, with the exception of Hulk Hogan. But you saw Jake the Snake holding his own against this monster, and it was an epic moment and something I will never forget.
All right, there you go, man. Andre the Giant and Jake the Snake. Holy cow, I totally forgot about that match, man. What about you?
Oh, yeah, I forgot, but, once he mentioned it, it's like, oh, I completely remember. And I remember Andre just being petrified of that snake.
Yeah. All right. So now what would you like to bring out there for everybody?
Well, I just wanted to mention, we're mentioning the highlights, but we can't have a podcast without mentioning a couple of the lowlights of Saturday Night Main Event. And my favorite one was the Halloween special. Well, I guess it was Halloween themed. And they had everyone dressed in costume, and they were bobbing for pumpkins in a bucket of chocolate syrup with many pumpkins, and it was Bobby Heenan wearing a weasel hat. Well, he said it was a raccoon hat, but everybody called it a weasel hat. And it was him versus one of the members of Hillbilly Jim's family. I don't remember if it was cousin. What was his name?
Uncle Elmer. That's his name.
So those two squared off, and you got Mean Gene trying to stand in the middle, hold the microphone with the 30-foot corded wire. Macho and Elizabeth are dressed like Tarzan and Jane. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat is dressed like Zorro. Everyone's there, and the way they did it was they started off the segment with Bobby Heenan practicing, and he's got chocolate syrup all over, and he's practicing because he wants to win. And then goes to a match, and some of the participants have matches. Well, you can tell that they pre-recorded this whole segment, and then they just spliced it in. So they,
Yeah.
It was bad. It was funny, and then at the very end they had another competition for the Halloween segment, and it was basically passing a pumpkin from chin to chin, and Macho Man's team lost because Elizabeth dropped it, and then he proceeded to look like he was going to beat her as they went off air.
Oh my gosh, I vaguely remember that, just vaguely. A couple other things that kind of stand out to me. One of them, I think, if I recall, Uncle Elmer got married on Saturday Night Main Event. Do you remember that one? That was an early one. But there was this big to-do where he actually got married, and Hillbilly Jim and the whole, good group of guys were all there. And I recall, I'm trying to think which one it was. Then there's also the one where Kurt Hennig destroyed the world heavyweight title. You remember that?
I do, and that gave birth to the hardcore title later on. They taped it up.
Yep. But there's so many on there that I keep going back and forth going, yeah, I forget this and I forget that. But there were so many great matches. Savage versus Bret Hart, I remember, was a great one, too. Probably one of his first single matches, I believe, for Bret Hart.
And another one, a memorable, it's memorable and it's not. It's just the way it is set up. They had there wasn't like USA where you could run over.
Mm-hmm.
You had a certain amount of time and they cut you off.
Yeah.
And it was Strikeforce versus the Hart Foundation for the tag team titles. And they're like, they went to, sign off. And so basically they were running the credits as the match was still going on. So the commentating just cut off completely. And you're watching them finishing up the match. And you get to see Santana roll Bret Hart up in a small package for the 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you know who wins the match. But you didn't hear any commentary for like the last 2 minutes because credits were rolling.
Ain't that crazy?
It's amazing.
The other one that kind of stood out to me, and thanks to Wikipedia, but I forgot that Hogan and Andre faced off one last time just before WrestleMania 3. They were on Saturday Night Main Event, March 14th, 1987, but they were in a Battle Royal. The only reason I bring this show up is because it drew a 11.6 rating, which evidently still remains the highest rating for any show during that time slot, even after all these years.
You also had their rematch afterwards. That was one of the highest rated shows ever. Mm-hmm. And the Hebner turn, that's one of your favorites.
Yeah.
I think that's still the
on
most
a Friday night
match.
Yeah.
On network TV.
It's unreal. But a lot of history, a lot of great things. And you know what? I know they brought it back in 2006 to 2008, right. But it didn't have that same feel to it because, as we were talking earlier, wrestling main events were so readily accessible. It wasn't a big to-do like it was when it was originally brought together. Because we could watch 3 shows a week. Well, actually, even more than that. You could watch 3 or 4 shows a week, and it didn't have that feel to it. Yeah, they put some great matches on, but overall, I didn't watch a whole lot of it, to tell you the truth.
Well, I mean, anymore you can do, 12 hours of wrestling programming on cable TV easily.
Yeah.
So it's an oversaturation sometimes.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what happened, why the mystique of Saturday Night's Main Event didn't quite catch on like they had hoped once again.
Do you remember the Kung Fu match with Mr. Fuji versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that?
No.
Fuji actually got out there in the ring in his tights and did his thing?
No, I don't remember that one.
You'll have to go back on the network and find that.
All right. I remember the cage match between Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff and Hulk Hogan. And remember, they were battling, and at the very end of the match, they both crawled out, and with the cameras, it looked like they landed at the exact same time.
Yes.
And I remember that. That was on Saturday Night Main Event. And like I said, there's a lot of those memories that they come from Saturday Night Main Event, which is crazy. But yeah, overall, Saturday Night Main Event got to be one of the most iconic wrestling shows on TV. Very visionary on their part, and you know what? I'm glad as a wrestling fan that I got to experience it when it was on. And if you haven't, you need to go to the network and check it out.
Yeah, and the network is worth its weight in gold for stuff like this, especially if you're wrestling fans. And you have to be. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a hardcore wrestling fan.
That's right.
So it's something that you'll appreciate.
All right, and with that, we're going to segue, Tom, into the new segment that you've named. So go ahead and throw out the name there.
All right. We'd like to call this segment Hitting the Ropes. And we're just going to kind of spitball a few things, kind of maybe not necessarily a recap, but just some things that we thought were interesting in the last week or so.
All right. Well, starting off, I got to do this for you, okay? You called it a week in advance that it was going to be Woken Matt Hardy versus Bray Wyatt. So I have to give you total credit for that, because the podcast we did last week, you were all over that, saying that was going to be the whole feud that was going to start this whole Woken universe. And so kudos to you, man.
Oh, thank you. What can I say? My spirit was possessed. I don't know. I loved that segment. That was my favorite segment of all Monday Night Raw.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy they're doing it.
And you know what it seems? It seems like he's going to be able to do that character like it's supposed to be done. You know, it's a goofy idea. It's out there, but I liked how they put it out there, and I think it's going to help Bray too.
Yeah, I think it's going to help both, and I think they're going to let him do the character as he sees fit. And the main thing is, it's going to draw money and it's going to draw attention, and that's what Vince wants.
Should put him back in the main event portion too. I would guess, if this gets over. And with that is kind of what it is. Just a quick little rundown of something that we watched during the week. We don't want to put a whole show into it, but we'll take a couple seconds just to step back and go, okay, hey, that's cool. Once again, Tom, remind everybody what is coming up at the end of the year.
Our end of the year awards, and we have it up on Twitter, where you can actually vote for several categories. For example, your favorite match, favorite feud, rookie of the year, just to name a few. That is coming up, and there's also the number you can call in and leave your suggestions.
715-600-3263. And if you don't want to do that, by all means, you can leave a comment on Twitter, and we'll incorporate that into the show too. Because you know what? That's what we're looking for, is some input as we're talking about things that we've grown up with and enjoyed. And I know there's many people out there that enjoyed the same thing as us. Or you may have a different idea. And that's what's cool about Twitter. And we want to thank you once again for, geez, what do we grab? Another 100 followers on Twitter this week?
We're climbing. I'd like to see 700 by the end of next week, but we're getting there.
All right, man. You're going to have to work a little harder now.
Well, hey, I was spot on last week. I don't know what I can do for next week.
You just got to keep working it, man. Just work it. All right, folks. Thanks a lot for joining us once again. And once again, hit us up at UTRR Podcast on Twitter. Say hi. We'll keep in touch. And vote, and keep voting. Yeah, hell, vote 5-6 times if you want. Doesn't matter. But make your voice heard in the Under the Ring Report 2017 Year-End Awards.
This is Harley Race, and if you want to hear about wrestling and what's happening today, listen to Under the Ring.
Follow the Under the Ring Report on Twitter at UTRR Podcast. You can subscribe to the Under the Ring Report on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher, or visit undertheringreport.com. Thanks for listening to the Under the Ring Report.